engagements abroad. Worried about imperial overreach, most of the American left opposed direct U.S. military action against Bashar al Assad's regime in the early 2010s, even though it was Russian and Iranian intervention on behalf of Syria's dictator that bore the marks of a real imperial enterprise, not just an imagined one.
They have very successfully made it so America did absolutely nothing in Syria.
Yeah, right. No, he just said it. That word direct is the load bearing frame of that sentence. Oh no, people were opposed to direct U.S. military invasion of Syria, other than, I don't know, arming half of the fucking country.
Yeah, I would say that we spent probably just in pure dollar amount a comparable amount to Russia, but yet nonetheless, I want to go back a little bit to Afghanistan and Iraq, and I've noticed this a lot in the Brookings sphere that they have successfully branded Iraq and Afghanistan as blunders, as missteps.
Yep.
When any of these other bad countries in the multipolar world do something, it is a deliberate evil act to dominate,
Yes.
humiliate, and
Yes.
extract. When America does it, it's oh whoops,
Oops.
oh whoops, we accidentally occupied this country for 20 years. We were accidentally bodyguards for the pedophile warlords of Afghanistan. Whoops, we accidentally extracted wealth and just did a fucking circular embezzlement scheme in Iraq. We accidentally did all this.
Oops.
Who knows how we did this? Maybe we left our keys in the car and we ended up over here.
We accidentally wore our gray sweatpants to the Vase Museum and got a boner and knocked them all over. Oh, geez. Yeah. Oh, sorry, guys. Also, he's saying, I mean, the litany here is like Putin's aggression was sort of encouraged by our failure to intervene in Syria, right? I mean, as we said, we did intervene. Well, we intervened short of the Iraq-Afghanistan solution, which had been direct military invasion, which, according to him, were blunders. So why would Syria have not also been a fucking blunder?
Matt, this is exactly the thing, because the Brookings Institute were probably the strongest voices of liberal institutions that were incredibly hawkish during the war on terror. They supported the Iraq and Afghanistan wars every step of the way. But the problem is, both of those were colossal fuck-ups for the U.S. geopolitical regime. And everyone recognizes that. Well, and also, fuck-ups in a certain sense in that it made us look bad, and everyone has to admit that they were mistakes now. But they weren't fuck-ups so much in, we got a lot of what we wanted out of those countries.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
They weren't Syria, too. We are occupying, right now, the most oil-rich portions of Syria.
And so,
that's a fucking win. You know?
And, we talked about this a little bit on our previous shows, but they're just so sore that they have to admit that the things they supported were mistakes, even though they haven't been punished for it or faced any consequences for them whatsoever. So, and don't get this twisted. If Iraq and Afghanistan had gone better, in terms of public opinion, they absolutely would have invaded Syria as well. 1,000%.
Absolutely.
That's the only thing holding them back was these so-called blunders that their innocent naivete led them to believe would have a better outcome.
And I think what their assumption here is that there is a gap between what we did in Syria and invasion. That if we had gone to that point, right? If we had gone a little bit further, that it would have worked somehow, right? That's the assumption here, the delusional assumption underlining all of this crackpot realist blob thinking is that America can, if it wants to, determine any outcome. And if it doesn't determine an outcome, it's because it didn't want it hard enough. But I'm sorry, Syria is the consequence of the failure of America's imperial overreach in Iraq and Afghanistan. And the consequence of that failure is that you don't get to decide who's in charge of Syria. And you can throw money in there and arm every psycho in town and destabilize it and make it ungovernable and assure that you have ability to influence the chaotic swirl, but you can no longer. That's a power America doesn't have anymore, and that is a reality that Putin reckons with and recognizes. But it's not because any of us lost our faith in the project. It's because this is what decline looks like. And anyone who can't recognize that this is what decline looks like is fucking delusional. And it's terrifying that all of the smart realists who have positions of influence are all gripped by the exact same mania that we have an ability as a state, as a project, that we no longer possess.
And like to the extent that we no longer possess it or ever did have it in the first place, I mean,
Never had it to
they
begin
blew.
with, Kumar.
Yeah, I mean, but like they blew their load on Iraq and
Yes,
Afghanistan.
that was
We're
their shot.
spent.
That was
It's shot.
that was
That
the
was
shot.
it. That was their that was going to be the fulfillment of everything that they were hoping for a new American century on the liberal and neoconservative side, which is basically at this point the same fucking one. And like whether we had it to begin with, is the point is like I think these people really believe that all it takes for us to get it back is that we just got to start believing in ourselves again. We have
It
to start
was.
believing in the rightness of our cause and our moral authority to dictate terms to the rest of the world.
Yeah, the war in Iraq was our attempt to extend the concept of American sovereignty in the face of a fully globalized capitalist order that, by definition, was going to reallocate power elsewhere because America was no longer necessary as a center point because you've gotten to an actual global interconnected system, and the war in Iraq was an attempt to resist that reality by seeing how far America's military power could be extended. It's sovereignly controlled military power, and we hit our fucking limit. And we found out that that power no longer existed. We'd given away the store, and now Putin is in a similar situation, faced with the total dissolution of sovereignty in the face of a global market, and trying now that America is no longer there to prevent other countries from acting like us, is going to make his throw at the dice. So he's probably going to get the same fucking answer that we got because it's too
Yeah.
fucking late.
And you know, for Shadi to talk about like, oh, Russia and China's ambitions or their imperial interventions in Syria, you know, either directly or through proxies, it's just like, well, look, we're not intervening directly in Yemen either, but like through by proxy, we're carrying out the single greatest fucking humanitarian catastrophe on the planet now, and not just over the last 10 days or 14 days, over the last 3 or 4 fucking years. You're talking
Between
about
Yemen
millions.
and Afghanistan, what are we doing? I mean, my God, Afghanistan, it's literally just being choked to death. We closed Afghanistan in. Remember at the beginning of the Iraq and Afghanistan invasion when the Northern Alliance threw all those Taliban guys in sealed container ships? We basically did that on the way out the door to the entire fucking country by just taking their goddamn money, and now we're just letting them starve. And we've been helping the Saudis genocide Yemen for the past 8 years now. I mean, there is literally no leg
Now,
to stand on, other than
yeah,
of
I
course
know.
the fact that our victims are less recognizably human to people inside the wire.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
Mhm.
And no, and if you bring this up, as people have been want to do with good cause over the last 2 weeks or so, you're increasingly being accused of doing whataboutism. And you're doing
Mhm.
whataboutism and engaging in a Russian propaganda effort. And to that, I had 2 points. The first is if you don't think that this whataboutism is relevant to the like I don't know moral or ethical standing of the people fucking like demanding things of you now here and now, if you can't assess their previous conduct based on if you can't use their previous conduct to assess their current behavior and opinions, then I don't know what the fuck you're even doing paying attention to the news or history or anything. The second point is, and Felix, we talked about this a little bit. If you think that we, Chapo and Trap House, are engaging in whataboutism on behalf of a Russian imperial project, or we are apologizing for an aggressive war, invasion of another sovereign country by Russia or whatever, don't listen to the fucking show.
That has been my favorite thing is someone saying, hey, I'm a fan of you, but I think you're excusing genocide. It's like, I mean, if you really think that, like,
That's a yikes, my dude. But what about what is about what Saddam's doing to the Kurds?
well, no,
I mean,
yeah.
how is it not the exact same fucking argument?
I mean, and to that end, it's like, yes, Russia's doing bad things. I'm glad that that's one group of people doing bad things that we happen to not be sending weapons to.
Yeah. And it's just like, yeah, like, if you think that like, oh, you can't talk about America's past sins while Russia is currently sinning, then it's just like, don't listen to the fucking show. I'm sorry, but I'm an American, and like, I feel a little bit more responsible for this country's conduct than I do about Russia's. And like, yes, if you want to hear it again, oh, I loudly and strongly condemn Putin's invasion of fucking Ukraine. Congratulations. Is it safe for you to continue listening to the show? Because let's get back into this fucking Brookings Institute asshole.
Well, yeah,
He
no,
says,
and this always comes up. Not when you're not, saying, oh, well, Russia has a just cause. Russia is showing restraint. You're not saying any of these things. You're not saying the things that you see in, the the Americans whose job I do not envy now, working for like Press TV or something, you are saying this is bad, but I fear we are going to see a repeat of so many bad outcomes these past 8 years, sending fucking God knows how many weapons that ended up God knows where in Ukraine. If you say that at all, you're excusing genocide.
I'm skipping a little ahead here on Shoddy, but he writes here America's low opinion of its own capacity for good and the resulting desire to retreat or disengage hasn't just been a preoccupation of the far left. The crisis of confidence has been pervasive, spreading to the halls of power, and even President Barack Obama, whose memorable mantra was instead of thinking about what we could do or what we could do better, Obama was more interested in a self limiting principle. For their part, European powers, content to bask under their U.S. security umbrella, could afford to believe in fantasies of perpetual peace. Europe's gentleness and lethargy. Oh, yeah, Europe's been so fucking gentle. What a gentle fucking continent, the EU.
Yeah, the president of France is co-prince of Andorra just out of pure affinity.
It says, could afford to believe in fantasies of perpetual peace. Blah, blah, blah. One popular Twitter account, at ISEU Concerned, devoted itself to mocking the European Union's propensity to express concern but do little else whenever something bad happened. Suddenly, the EU has been aroused from its slumber, and the parody account was rendered temporarily speechless. This is no longer tepid concern, but righteous fury. Member states announced that they would send anti-tank weapons to Ukraine. Germany, for the first time, said it would ramp up its military budget to 100 billion euros. On the economic front, the EU announced some of the toughest sanctions in history. My podcast co-host, an Atlantic Council senior fellow, likened it to a holy war, European style. Boy, when have situations like that ever ended up badly?
European holy war? Sign me up.
Let's get Europe involved in another holy war against Russia. Good job. Sometimes unusual and extreme events mark the separation between old and new ways of thinking and being. This week, Berlin-based journalist Elizabeth Zarowski remarked the current moment reminded her of the memoir The World of Yesterday, written by the Austrian novelist Stefan Zweig as World War II loomed. In it, he recalls the twilight of the Austro-Hungarian Empire with an almost naive fondness. On the first day of the Ukraine invasion, I happened to be speaking to a group of college students who had no memory of September 11th. I told them that they may be living in history. Those students, like all of us, are bearing witness to one of those rare events that recast how individuals and nations alike view the world they inhabit. God, just like the fucking, just the enthusiasm these people have for another world war is really something. Because, like, to them, it's not about millions of people potentially dying. It's about, like, that feeling we all get as history's actors.
Also, hey, you know, if everyone gets nuked one way or another, we have solved this whole crisis of sovereignty and power, right? Because those supply chains will be good and snapped once and for all, and people can reconstitute power at a geographically fixed way. And hey, maybe you'll be on top of that. But like at this point, like a war is the only thing that's going to stop any of these fucking countries from slowly seeing their ability to assert any independent authority over events completely evaporate. I mean, right now it's mostly illusory, and the few things they still have control of are pressing the buttons on the military machine, and they're hoarding their fucking. They're very jealously guarding that power because it's increasingly the only one they really have left. And the danger we all face is that people are going to be more and more incentivized to press them and see what happens, just because the alternative is so grim and unavoidable through any other action.
And I just like I also hate the glibness with which people like Shadi talk about, oh, like America, like we've lost our confidence and we have this need to draw inward and retreat from the world. It's like America's it's the most wealthy country in the world, it's the most powerful country in the world, but we got a lot of fucking problems here at home. Like maybe now is not the best time to be remaking the world in our image. Maybe we should fucking fix some of our own problems here. And like that, and they're saying, oh, but you're going to abandon the rest of the world to torment and enslavement by aggressive states. It's just like what you're demanding is that we enslave the world by being an aggressive state.
Well, we finally have something more degenerated and perverse than Straussianism. Something more perverse than the world should be Gunsmoke, because unless there is a constant struggle of good versus evil, us being good, will fall apart, our institutions will crumble. The institutions have already crumbled, but guys like Shadi want a version of Straussianism, but where, instead of good versus evil, or else the institutions collapse. It's just Friday Night Lights. We need to have the big
Clear
game.
eyes.
Need to have the big game all the time, so I feel kind of good. Like I don't just take Wellbutrin.
Clear eyes, full hearts.
I need a pageant.
Can't lose.
I need a spectacle that I can engage in that can give me some sense of power. It's like a fucking Viagra commercial.
Well, he closes out the essay by saying, in any number of ways, Russia's aggression has underscored why Biden was right and why authoritarians and the authoritarian idea itself are such a threat to peace and stability. Russia invaded Ukraine, a democracy, because of the recklessness and domination of one man, Vladimir Putin. The countries that have rallied most enthusiastically behind Ukraine have almost uniformly been democracies, chief among them the United States. America is lousy, disappointing, and maddeningly hypocritical in its conduct abroad, but the notion of any moral equivalence between the United States and Putin's Russia has been rendered laughable. And if there is such a thing as a better world, then anti-imperialists may find themselves in the odd position of hoping and praying for the health and longevity not of just the West, but of Western power. God, just let that marinate for a second, because I just love the way the ease with which he can say, yes, America's conduct has been disappointing and sometimes maddeningly hypocritical in its conduct abroad. But it's like, okay, you can't admit that America killed about 1 million people in the war on terror as a whole, and birthed many of the subsequent crises and humanitarian catastrophes that are bedeviling this planet. You can't admit that